Hi everybody. Okay, so this is my second video on the sound of the Gryphon, Apex, and Commander combination. I'm going to call it the good, bad, and ugly as well, but there will probably be a third video on the Gryphon, because at some point I want to be able to compare it to the D'Agostino electronics as well, so stay tuned for that. In order to hear the amplifier and the preamplifier, I decided to hook up the Acora. So why is that? If you have watched the previous video, I talked about how the electronics seem to be almost chameleon-like, very transparent in its ways. So for example, I noticed that there was the first day where it sounded pretty good but not amazing, and then the next day it sounded not great at all because, stupid me, I had left it in low bias. And then after I remembered that and I switched it to high bias, and in fact switched to medium bias and then high bias, you could distinctly hear those differences. And then towards the end of the video, I remarked, almost now in retrospect, in an backhanded way, that I felt that it was worth the money. I wasn't necessarily all that crazy, and that's not true. I did, in fact, begin to quite enjoy it. But I had higher hopes. So fast forward, the electronics now have about 250 hours. And of course, during that time, we got in the D'Agostino Relentless 800s. Either Mike or Allison will leave a link in the description box. But I continued to play the electronics overnight, never really turned it on, and I would periodically come in and check it and listen and so on. And so as part of the testing protocol, I chose the Acora, and because the Acora is one of the most neutral speakers I know. It doesn't really have a sound of its own, in that you can't say that it's like a warm sound, you can't say that it's a cold sound. It doesn't have any obvious weaknesses that I can think of, other than, of course, it's not exactly cheap. And so I often will use the Acora speakers when I want to get to the bottom of what something really sounds like. And to help me, I asked Valerio, who's the chief designer of Acora, to come by and help me set them up. Now, I say help me. Turned out that he actually just took over and just did all the setups, and I watched because he's a master at setting up, and he knows his speakers really, really well. And I learned quite a few things just by watching him, which is always a good thing. I certainly don't know everything, and I'm always happy to learn from people. So he basically finished setting up last Saturday. Today is this Saturday, so it's about a week later, and I've spent quite a few days now since listening and enjoying the system. The rest of the system includes, and not limited to, the Inuos, what is it called? I apologize, I can never remember all these names. The Inuos Zenith server, PS Audio SACD transport with the Direct Stream DAC Mark II. I also included the MSB reference DAC, a whole loom of Shunyata Sigma cables, and other things as well. These were the primary things that I used. Okay, so let's get to the good. Quite possibly the most neutral set of electronics I've heard, and I mean that in a very complimentary way. Oftentimes there are characteristics of electronics once you live with it for a while, and which is why I generally never make any conclusions about products that I see at a show. I will form an opinion about what the overall sound was like, and then if I'm interested, I will follow through with more investigation. But if it sounds bad, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It can mean a lot of different things. And I certainly cannot tell you if I hear something in a room, whether it's because of the amplifier or the speakers, unless I know the rest of the system really, really well, and the only thing that's changed is the amplifier or the speaker. So oftentimes, if somebody says, well, what do you think of this product, I'll often say, I've never heard it, and I don't know. So in the case of the Acora and the Gryphon system, because I know the Acora really well, having sold them and owned them for, I guess, a couple of years now, and having shown them at shows, I essentially know their character really, really well. And the Gryphon is essentially the same as electronics. Almost no detectable, obvious character of its own. If you play a recording that is a certain sound, it will play that back. If you play a recording that's completely different, it will show that. If the recording has a big sound stage, you will hear that, and if it's obviously small, you will get that as well. It just was very chameleon-like. More so than almost anything I've heard. And yes, my first impressions are that it is more neutral than, for example, the D'Agostino. When I switched out, for example, the PS audio transport, and I started playing the same track on Cobas, you could hear the difference between the Cobas and the PS and this original disc. When I switched out the server for the MSB going with Ethernet directly using the renderer module, you could also hear the differences as well. Not always good or bad, just differences you could easily hear. Same with the DAC. When I switched out from the PS audio to the MSB, there was a world of difference, at least to my ears. It on the one hand shows how good a value the PS audio is, and on the other hand, it shows how far ahead the MSB is. So that's what the system seems to do. It's very neutral. It's very chameleon-like. I mentioned, so let me give you some examples of what I heard. Starting from the bass. Now, the Acoras have very tight, very neutral bass. It goes down as low as in the recording and as low as the room will support or allow. Very tight. It doesn't boom at all because the cabinet is just rock solid, no pun intended, and the woofers are very controlled. And in this case with the Gryphon, you get all of that. Dynamics, unbelievable. Again, from soft to very loud and everything in between, just startling, much like a very good electrostatic speaker. This week, Wednesday, a couple of old clients of mine had heard that we are now carrying Gryphon, so they wanted to come and listen. They're very interested in the Diablo 333. And since we haven't received those yet, they came in to listen to the Apex. And they asked, after I played them a bunch of music that they liked, they said, okay, now let's play something to really showcase how good these amps are. So I put on these sonic spectaculars that I generally don't play for myself, but clients who want to, I will. So I played music that I have banned multiple times in the store, but they wanted to hear it. So Kashmir, I played crazy stuff from very soft to really loud, and you could hear the walls rattling and the ceiling shaking. And when we were done, the guys were absolutely blown away, just absolutely blown away. That's how dynamic the system is capable of being. And same thing with the bass. Very tight, very controlled, very articulate. Soundstage, as I said earlier, as wide and as deep as I've ever heard. Play your favorite tracks and you will see. Again, assuming you've got a good setup and your speakers are capable, the soundstage at its best will envelop you. Play some for Madonna's Vogue Q mix, and it will startle you with how it goes around the room. It's capable of the most startlingly wide and deep soundstage that's in the recording, and then simultaneously as flat and as mono as it gets if it's in the recording. I kept writing these words: neutral, implacable, unyielding, despite my high volumes at times. And that's true, because I would play some very large-scale symphonic music, or I would also play some EDM. Sometimes in the mornings I'll come in very early and I would come into this room and crank it up. And my office is right beside this room, and I could hear and feel the music going through the walls, which is how I like to listen when I'm working. I don't want the music directly in front of me because then I get distracted. So I just want to hear this muffled sound coming through this, and it works. And I could certainly hear and feel how dynamic the music is despite that. And then I would come in and take a break and listen. And anyway, detail retrieval and transparency. Same thing as what I meant earlier about being very neutral. This system can retrieve detail that is buried in the recording that you may or may not be aware of subconsciously, but it's there. And then suddenly you're aware, oh my gosh, I'm hearing things that, again, the cliche, I've never heard before. I'll give you a couple examples. Bob Marley's No Woman, No Cry live at the Lyceum, 1975. So I've heard this album many, many, many times. He's one of my favorite artists. I mean, when you think Marley, you think, the man who popularized reggae to the rest of the world. And so in this particular track, he's playing live in front of an audience. And what's funny is you hear the audience anticipating the lyrics. So the band is playing the bars, and they start singing. And the song hasn't started yet. Bob Marley hasn't started singing yet. The backup singers haven't started singing yet. And the audience is so happy and so relaxed and so high and so drunk. They start singing. And what's also funny, if you listen, you'll also hear a bunch of people singing completely out of tune. It's so involving that way. As I say, I've heard this cut many, many, many times. Never noticed that before. And then for the first time I hear it and go, this guy's completely, high and out of tune. But it didn't matter because they were having such a great time. And because they were having such a great time, Bob Marley himself is also having a great time. He's singing one of his anthemic music and just a wonderful piece of music. Listen to Eric Clapton's playing Unplugged MTV. And he's playing his 1939 Martin guitar. I've never had, obviously, the pleasure of hearing it live, but through that recording, you can hear how beautiful the tone of the guitar is, and you can see why Eric Clapton loves this guitar so much. These are the kinds of, and you also notice that in the recording, Eric Clapton is slightly to the right, center right, and he plays his guitar in his I shouldn't say very, but his often subtle way. He's not trying to, guitar access, like shredding or anything like that. He's just playing almost in a rhythmic way, a rhythm guitar way, where that supports the music rather than showcasing how great a guitarist he is. And then the question becomes, oh, that's great. It can do all the sound staging stuff. It can do all this detail. It can do all these dynamics. Is it musical? And my answer is yes. But if it's in the recording, inherently itself, it is not a quote-unquote musical combination. It's, in that sense, not a forgiving set of electronics like, say, a Macintosh is or some tube electronics. It doesn't round off the edges. It doesn't make bad recordings sound suddenly great. But if it's in the recording, if there's magic in the recording, either in terms of the performance or in terms of the recording or combination of both, hopefully, then it is startlingly magical. Let me give you an example. I played Daniel Barenboim leading the Chicago Symphony Orchestra playing Mahler's Symphony No. 5, the Adagietto movement. I've mentioned this particular movement before, but by different people. And this particular one, somehow it's just you could hear the recording even better. There's more space between the instruments. You could hear how the different sections of the orchestra come in and do what they're supposed to do. When the strings come in and they initially have this beautiful melodic progression, just absolutely gorgeous. And then suddenly as they hit the higher notes, Mahler puts in discordant notes, notes that suddenly jar you, that sound very unresolved. There's this tension, And then it goes even higher and suddenly it gets resolved and it's beautiful. It's got this absolutely sensuous, glorious music. And then again, he adds this jarring, discordant notes and causes more tension and jarring quality to the music. But he does it in such a masterful way that the piece is absolutely stunning. Compare and contrast that to his contemporaries, the contemporary classical composers of the time, Weber and Schoenberg, who I've tried for years to try and experience and enjoy, and I just can't, because it seems like they took joy and almost glee in trying to find as many discordant notes as possible and just put them all in. It's just like there was just no melody, nothing to hum to, nothing to enjoy. It was like, okay, just put in a few more sevenths and a few more minors and a whole bunch of different. It was like odd. Not with Mahler. Mahler had this stunning ability to combine romanticism with his contemporary music of the time and blend it in such a way that the end result, in the case of the Adagietto, is just one of the finest pieces of music I've ever heard. And when I listen to it with this orchestra, I'm swept away with the beauty of the piece. So yes, in that sense, extremely musical, but not in a way that it would take a bad recording that has nothing special and suddenly make it better. As they say, garbage in, garbage out. I mentioned earlier about dynamics. Here's an example of what I mean. William Steinberg with the Boston Symphony Orchestra playing Gustav Holst's The Planets. So again, a piece that I've listened to many, many times. Mars in particular, the piece Mars, calls it the bringer of war. And listen to how it captures the detail, just retrieves it effortlessly. Right at the very beginning, you hear the string sections doing the spiccato. So they take their bow and they basically just tap on the strings to cause this percussive character. So, right? And then the horn section comes in and it's loud, well, slowly, and it builds and it builds and it builds, like announcing this tension that the war is about to happen, and be aware, and this tension continues to build and build until the very end, where it swells, and you get the timpanis and the whole orchestra just comes in, and you get this full fortissimo. When you listen to this particular track through the system, you hear everything. You hear all the different sections of the orchestra, regardless of how everything is being played and how loud is being played. It doesn't become a mush, like sometimes certain systems can do, because they're just not resolving enough, not clear enough, not transparent enough. I wrote down here goosebumps. So the conclusion in terms of the good, this set of electronics, in particular the amplifier, will drive any speaker I can think of. I can't think of a speaker that it will not drive and do a good job with, because it's got so much power and it's got so much and it's so neutral. So if your speakers are a certain way, it's not going to make it more. If a speaker is a different way, it's not going to make it worse. So I can't think of anything that it cannot do a good job with. Okay, those are the goods. Let's go to the bads. As I said, it's very neutral. But the flip side of neutral is that this is not a forgiving, sweet, soft, saccharine kind of electronics. It's not. So if you're looking for that, run as far as you possibly can from this. This is not it. Okay. Second thing is, it gets hot. Because I leave it on all the time. When I come into this room and you open the door, it's like a wave. It's not quite as bad as a sauna, but it's like a wave of heat that greets you when you open the door. But thankfully, because the room is large enough, and right now we're still in the throes of late winter, it warms the room in a nice, comfortable way, and I'm truly enjoying it. And for the best sound, you must use high bias class A. The other bad is, I mentioned in the past, the infrared remote. And the reason is because you have to point the remote at the preamplifier. Now, the way we've got it set up, we've got the preamp and the sources on one side of the wall, on the side wall, and then the amplifier on the front between the speakers. So anytime I want to control anything on the preamplifier, I have to aim the remote at the preamplifier. But because of the way that it's organized, my seat is in such a way that if I aim the remote directly at the preamp, it doesn't see it. So I have to go this way and then turn the remote and then aim it. Now, there are workarounds, I know. I do big installs of smart homes and so on. I know that. But it's just a little thing that I thought I'd mention. And of course, if you are planning to put your preamplifier into a closed cabinet, something to be aware of. The amplifier takes up a lot of space. It's a big amplifier. I mentioned in the uncrating, it's not small. And so if you don't have the space, you really need to think about whether or not this will fit into your room. In addition, the preamplifier requires 2 shelf spaces. So again, they're not, width-wise, they're about the same as most other electronics, but they're quite tall. So you need to make sure that your shelf can accommodate the preamplifier. Okay, those are the bad that I could think of. Let's talk about ugly. Okay, no way around this. It is expensive. It's $170,500 US for the combination. That does not include your sources, doesn't include your speakers and so on. It's a lot of money. Long-term service. In my experience, now I have not owned any Gryphons long enough to have to deal with service, but I know people who have. And it's not just Gryphon. Almost any electronics, over time, you will require service. But Class A amplifiers in particular will require service because of the heat. And over time, stuff inside, capacitors get dried out. It should probably be sent back every 10 years or so, just for maintenance anyway. So just be aware of that. Do not throw out the crates. Be aware of where they are and so on, but something to be aware of. All right, so here's my conclusion. I'm going to tell you the conclusion by way of a story, as usual. And of course, Allison's going to put down her little funny memes about my stories. Okay, about 25 years ago, a very good client of mine who's also a foodie invited me out to have some really nice food. He says, this new place just opened up. They serve Italian-French mix. You're going to love it. I said, okay. Now, I am no foodie. I mean, I can't taste anything. As far as I'm concerned. So, funny story as far as, my wife is concerned, when I used to drive gas cars, I would fill up with gas, and every so often I'm hungry, I go in to pay. And of course, in the gas stations, they always have all these chocolate bars for sale, $3 for $1. They have the Captain Crunch and Snickers and, what's the one with the coconut? Do you know? No, you don't know? And I would $3 for $1. I'll just grab a whole bunch, go and pay for it, and of course eat a whole bunch on the way home, and say to my wife, who's a chocoholic, here, look at what I bought. And she would look at me in pity, and she says, who the hell eats these horrible chocolates? And then we would go to a proper chocolate place, and she would buy these very expensive slabs of chocolate, and she would break a small little piece for me. Small because she knows I can't taste crap. Here, try this. And I'll eat and go, no difference, right? So just to give you a background of my non-foodie status. Anyway, we go to this place, and sure enough, absolutely glorious, beautiful decorations, place is full. We get seated, and the waiter comes over. My friend orders his wine. He's a big wine guy as well. I don't drink, so I said, just give me some water. And they said, flat water? I said, yes, flat water. And then again, disgust. They walk away. They come back with this bottle. I mean, this beautiful bottle of water. It looks like tap water. I didn't know any better, with some slices of lemon. Turns out later it was $10 for this little bottle of water. Anyway, so my friend says, what do you want to eat? I said, well, I'm pretty simple in my taste. I eat beef, meats, vegetables, rice, noodles. Nothing out of the ordinary. He says, okay, great. I'm going to treat you to the best tasting meats you've ever had, right? And they're going to do it in such a way that you will actually taste the meat. So great. He orders for me. I have no idea what he orders. 15 minutes later, the food comes, and the first dish is thinly sliced venison, raw, with a bit of olive oil on the side and a little bit of cheese grated over it. Turns out it's called carpaccio. No idea what it is. All I know is this is raw. This is freaking raw. I mean, it's like, ugh, who eats this? He looks at me and he starts laughing because he could obviously tell my face was horrified. He says, no, you got to try this. You will actually taste the meat the way it tastes. You know, there's no, just try it. Eventually, I took a slice, held my nose, and I threw it in. I literally didn't want to smell it. As I chewed, I started thinking, oh, it's not bad. You know, I haven't thrown up. Actually starts tasting pretty good. And at the end of it, I thought, oh, this is quite nice. So I had another slice. And then I thought, okay, that's enough. I don't want to, God forbid, eat something that at some point my mind rebels and then I start throwing up. So he had the rest of it. And then the main dishes come, and there's a whole bunch of beautiful things, and then my dish comes, and it is the steak that he ordered me. On the outside, it's charred, but the plate has some blood on it. I'm thinking, I don't usually order my steak like that. I usually order my steak like medium well or well done. This has blood. I'm starting to freak out again. He looks at me, he starts laughing, he says, try it. This is special Wagyu beef. They have to fly it in from Japan or wherever the hell it came from. Try it. So I cut into it and squirt of blood, and the thing mooed at me. I mean, yeah, this is how psychologically I was horrified. And he couldn't stop laughing. He was having a great time at my expense. Why do I tell this story? Well, when I did finally get enough nerve to eat the beef, it was the best, absolutely the best beef I've ever had. Tender, very tasty. It was made very simply. No special sauces, nothing like that. It was just a beef. What the Gryphon system does is precisely that. It will reproduce for you what you feed it. If you give it amazing recordings of beautiful performances, you will be in heaven. You will have never experienced anything that great. If you feed it stuff that is not great, stuff that you don't care about, stuff that the producer didn't care about, music that is awful, then it's going to sound awful. It's not going to hide that. So that's what the Gryphon system sounds like, to the best of my experience so far. As I say, I'm going to do more listening over time as I get more time and so on, but I can certainly say right now, for now, as a combination, it is definitely the most neutral system I've heard in terms of electronics. It is able to retrieve detail in a way that is completely effortless. You will hear things in the recording that you've never heard before, and I know it's a cliche, but this is absolutely true. It will change like a chameleon. When you play a recording and suddenly you go, wow, listen to the soundstage. And then the next time you listen to another cut and you go, oh, didn't realize that he was recorded center right or center left, or, oh, listen to the triangle. I could hear that. I never heard that before. You're going to hear and experience all of this. And if you enjoy not only the music, but also hearing how it was done, this will be amazing for you. All right. Who's the Gryphon for? Obviously, assuming that you can afford it. And it's very sad that the vast majority of us will not be able to. It's just a lot of money. Who is it for? Well, somebody who wants the real deal. Somebody who wants what's on the recording. Somebody who wants to experience everything that the record producer put in, and you want to love and experience that. No ketchup, no sweeteners, no apologies. You have a good collection of music that you love, a collection of music that's well recorded that you want to experience at its highest level. The Gryphon's for you. You want the best built products possible. Gryphon has, over the last 30, 40 years, created a reputation of making some of the most reliable, some of the finest products out there. And that's true. And if that's what you want, the Gryphon is one of the things that you should consider. You want something that will make a visual statement. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there are very few products on the market that is built and looks this way, that automatically says with no reservation whatsoever that I am apex predator, hence the name Apex. This is what Gryphon sought out to achieve, and I believe they've done a great job of doing that. All right, so those are my conclusions. Please leave me your comments if you have heard it, if you know systems that do the same thing for you. I would love to read about it. As usual, I read all your comments. Just put comments below, and thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.